Hi everybody, so today's lesson is going to be on x-intercepts and y-intercepts. So I'm going to start with the y-intercept because we already know what that is, right? So remember, where does my graph cross my y-axis, right? So this would be my y-intercept. I don't know if you can tell my scale is going up by 3s, right? So remember, your y-intercept is always going to have x is 0, and then you're going to go up or down on the y-axis. So it's always going to be 0, and then b we call our y-intercept, okay? Now, what happens though when we don't have a graph, and I'm going to ask you to calculate the y-intercept when we don't have a graph and we just have an equation. So you guys already know, if you put this into y equals mx plus b form, you guys can clearly identify what the y-intercept is, right? And we should really write it as a ordered pair. There's another way you guys can do this, okay? So notice again, x is 0. So what you can do algebraically is let x equal 0. And what that means is I'm going to plug 0 in for x. Right? So negative 5x is negative 5 times x. So negative 5 times 0 would be 0. And then after you let x equal 0, you're just going to solve for y. So that's how I also got my y-intercept. So if I was to graph that, right, my y-intercept would somehow my line would intercept the y-axis at 8. Okay, I'm going to do another example later with you, but let's move on to the x-intercept. Okay, so the x-intercept, similar to the y, except now we're focusing on the x-axis, right? So where does my line cross the x-axis? So notice it crosses at negative 4, okay? But think about the coordinate here. If I asked you what is this coordinate, right, you would go, remember you always start on the x-axis, left or right. So notice we're going left 4, and then did I move up or down? No. So my coordinate here would be negative 4, 0. Okay? Well, in this example. Any other coordinate, just so you know, will always have the x-intercept, and then the 0 would be my y. Okay, so that's the difference, if you can see, between the x-intercept and the y-intercept. Now, to solve this algebraically, you can't put it into y form. You would have to let, right, what ordered pair, what coordinate is 0? The y. So your steps here would be let y equal 0. Okay, so you have really no choice but to do the x-intercept algebraically. So if I'm going to plug 0 in for y, let's see what we get. So negative 5x plus 0 is just negative 5x. Solve for x. So x equals negative 8 over 5. And you guys can figure out what that is as a decimal if you would like. Okay, so let's just review what we just did. So I let y equal 0, plugged it in, and what did I solve for? X. So my x-intercept, always write these as ordered pairs, is negative 1.6, 0. You can leave it as a fraction if you want, but if I asked you to plot it on a graph, it would make more sense to put it in decimal form. All right, so let's do another example together. I'm going to do the first one on your worksheet for today, just so you can remember how to do this. So for number 1, we have to find the x-intercept and the y-intercept. So I'm just going to make a little t-chart. For some reason, I always work on the y-intercept first because we're so used to it. So first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to put it into y equals mx plus b form. Okay, so to do that, I'm going to subtract 4x on both sides, right? And then in y equals mx plus b form, what is my y-intercept? 5. So you're just going to write it as 0, 5. Okay? And remember, algebraically, if you wanted to, you could plug in 0 for x. You would still get 5 for y. Okay, so x-intercept, if you look at your notes, this is where we have to plug in 0 for y. It's almost like the opposite, right? To find the x-intercept, you let 0 equal y. To find the y-intercept, you plug 0 in for x. Okay, so if I'm going to plug 0 in for y, this is what I'm going to get, right? 4x plus 0 equals 5. Let's solve for x. So x should equal 5/4. So my answer would be 5/4, comma 0. Or if you wanted to change it to 1.25, you can. Right, so just remember, the x-intercept there should be a value here, and your y is 0. For the y-intercept, your x is always 0, and your y is always your y-intercept. All right, so try some other examples, and then we will walk around and help you if you need us.